jumping in. So welcome to our session on CBE and accreditation. Basically, what is that journey, right? What do we do? So my name is Dr. Rhonda Blackburn. I am the Senior Director for Academic Services and Client Success with Strut Learning. And I get to help a lot of people with CBE, as Nathan just said, being able to help learn the product, but also strategically plan how that happens. So with me, I'm so excited that I have two amazing people that have gone through all of this and are here to share their wisdom. But I have Brett Andrews with me. He's the Senior Vice President for Academic Innovations from Oklahoma Wesleyan University. So I'll let him explain a little bit more about what he does.
So I'm the R&D department, if you will. We have an extensive online and graduate campus, as a lot of campuses do. But somebody has to be in charge of the supply chain, if you will, of bringing new programs online. And so that is my role, to guide and direct that.
Wonderful. Thank you. And we also have Ellen Derwin from University of Massachusetts Global. She is the Associate Dean of Curriculum and Assurance of Learning, which I love that, and Interim Associate Vice Chancellor and Institutional Assessment and Planning, and also a Professor of Communication. So Ellen.
Hello, everybody. Too many hats. But essentially, I oversee curriculum and assessment, both for the School of Arts and Sciences and for the institution. So like Brett, that also means any new programs, regardless of modality in our situation. And we are now fully online. So our programs are either online via Blackboard or they are competency-based via Strut. And I've been with the university for over 20 years. We've changed names. We were once part of the Chapman University system in Southern California. We were Brandman University. And now in the last year to 2 years or so, we've been UMass Global.
Thank you. So kind of getting us started, again, we're trying to think about accreditation when it comes to CBE programs, but I would love to hear from both of you. Why did you decide to get into the CBE world as one of your innovative programs that you're doing? So let's go ahead and start with Ellen.
Okay, and if I look to the side, it's just because I am looking at some notes, so I hope you all don't mind. The main issue really was to try to decrease cost while increasing access and quality. So, and during the time we did it, which was actually around 2013, we were first in the catalog for a competency-based program in 2014-15. So we were very early adopters, which means we had the chance to make a lot of mistakes that nobody could tell us not to make, and learn a lot, of course, and improve things. But we were concerned about the escalating costs, and are concerned, the escalating cost of tuition and fees. This is an all-you-can-learn model, as I'm sure most of you know, and it's not tied to seat time. So it's really up to the learner how much time they spend. And that really allows them to be more flexible with what ends up being their cost and what ends up being their investment of time. We have always supported adult learners. That has always been our heritage, that and military learners. And so continuing to do that, we wanted to proceed in a way that was as innovative as possible and continue to support those learners so that they could work at their own pace. And then across employers and so forth, there's been discussion about identifying learning competencies, and of that being one of the most important things, beginning with the end in mind, backward design, and all of that good stuff, and making sure that we could identify what really needs to be learned to be applied in the workplace. So it being so outcomes based and focusing on what graduates can do and not focusing on necessarily the front end. What do I put in this curriculum? What does the syllabus look like? Start with the back end, and then the rest will follow. So those were the major highlights for us.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Brett, do you want to talk us a little bit about why did Oklahoma Wesleyan University decide to get into CBE?
Yeah, so I came back to the university. I had been an employee here before and went off and had some other adventures, and came back really for this position. And the portfolio of degree programs that they had been offering online was old. Can I put it that way? And a little bit of my background will help you understand how I look at things. But I'm a business professor, and I have spent most of my career as the dean of a business school somewhere. And so I tend to look at these programs that we typically, throw out to the adult market, is what we've called it in the past, with online learners in some way. In the same way that a for-profit company would look at product lines. And so I have kind of a chessboard of what our products are, where they are positioned in the market. And so my attraction to CBE as a new modality, and then the things that come with it, curricular design and learner outcomes, really begins to put us in front of all our competitors. The subscription pricing in my state, really, nobody's got that unless it's one of the big players nationally. There are no local universities that have this here in my state, and it will immediately put us at the front of the line instead of always being that little school playing catch up. So other than that, it's everything that Ellen said.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's I think a lot of people decide to kind of jump into CBE to really think about more like those adult learners, right? How do we allow them to utilize the knowledge they already have because they've been in the field so long, it's either in the military or in business or corporate, and be able to get that degree that they need. So it sounds like that's part of an underlying thing that both of y'all have looked at. So since we're talking about accreditation, would love to let everyone know what accreditation agency y'all both work with, so that way they can kind of understand your viewpoint from that point. So, Brett, who do you
go ahead, Ellen?
Oh, sure. So ours is WASC. When accreditation was more regional, now it's more open, but that's fairly recent. That's Western Association, and lots of international, California, Hawaii, and Guam. Actually, people think it's more of the West, but it hasn't been. But now we are really open to anywhere that wants to accredit with that accrediting body. And I've been a co-chair of the Substantive Change Committee for WASC. That's a volunteer position. I've done site visits and looked at competency-based and other proposals. So I know it from both ends, from creating the proposal as well as the receiving and reviewing the proposals.
Yeah, I guess you could say my experience is very similar to Ellen's. We are in the central United States, so we're with the Higher Learning Commission out of Chicago. And I have volunteer positions there. Not only am I a senior team chair, but senior meaning I've just done it for a long time. And I'm also in the middle of a 4-year rotation on the Institutional Actions Council. And if you're in Higher Learning Commission, you know what that means. It doesn't mean a lot to anybody else. But as far as CBE goes, I've kind of seen it from both sides. But here at the university, I was the one that wrote the application and assembled the materials for that and sent it off for review. And, of course, received that back. So seen it from both sides.
Wonderful. Thank y'all. So knowing that both of y'all obviously have gotten in, started putting or have put together a CBE program, you both have had to go through accreditation. And so I would like us to kind of start thinking about what does that process look like? How did you get started with it? So Brett, let's start with you. How did you get started with it when you decided, okay, we're going to go CBE? What was your next steps?
Yeah, so like a lot of accrediting bodies, CBE is relatively still new. And if I can draw a parallel to help everybody kind of wrap their minds around what's happening, this is the exact same kind of conversation that most universities were having 25 years ago at the advent of online learning. So we were really struggling on how to do a compressed, lockstep, modular type of program in an online environment and get the same or similar outcomes in an online environment that we do on campus. Well, we're doing the exact same thing. The modality is simply different. The curriculum is simply different. So once I wrapped my mind around that, then it was going through the process with the Higher Learning Commission. The Higher Learning Commission, and I think there's a link to that page here. They require that an institution go through an approval process. So writing an application, sending it off, having a panel look at it and approve it for your first 2 programs to be approved. Once they have approved 2 of them for that institution, then you no longer need to go through the long approval process. Assuming you already have permission to offer the degree that you want to offer in CBE format, you can just go ahead and push it out as you would online. So you already have institutional approval for competency-based education. So it's going through the first couple of processes. And so for us, it is a completely different substantive change application, specific questions towards CBE, and they are very, very detailed. So back to word problems again. So it was, I think when I was done with it, I think the application format is like a dozen pages long, and I think it was 60 by the time that I was done with it.
So Ellen, why don't you tell us a little bit about y'all's process, since it was quite a few years ago that you went through it, but so you can also kind of talk about, moving forward from there as well.
Sure. I'm going to share my screen as well and show you something that's in the resources. So hopefully you can see that. This is a page from the Substantive Change Manual for WASC, and I thought it would be helpful for you to see what some of the definitions are. But trying to stay kind of parallel to Brett's discussion with WASC, for the first change in modality, so whether you were a face-to-face institution going online, if you're going to a blended kind of a modality, or if you're going to CBE, if it's your first time doing something different, then it's called a structural change, and that requires more detail and a visit. Occasionally, things will get waived here and there, so depending upon the experience of the institution, but essentially going to anything that's that drastically different would require a visit. Once you've had one approved, in our case, then you can move forward with the structural change for the other competency-based programs. So then it's, with the substantive change. So then you would submit your substantive change. And then over time, depending upon the situation, it becomes you're less and less restricted in terms of what you need to do. But we'll start with the beginning. So we're just worrying about what you would need to do initially. And again, it's one of those templates like Brett is describing. And it starts out looking like it's not that much, but as you answer the questions, it becomes very lengthy, not only with the proposal, but the abundance of attachments that are required. So there's quite a lot to it. And I did include in the resources a link directly to the template so that you can take a look at that at your leisure, or we can look at various aspects of it if you'd like. But this particular document, this is just one page out of the long manual that talks about substantive change. And what you'll find with WASC, they'll call it direct assessment, meaning again that that's not credit hours or clock hours, it's time, as we discussed, as you all know. And then there is a mention of the need for U.S. Department of Education approval, which is a whole other kind of approval process. And that's for a direct assessment program to assure that your university can get Title IV funding for that program. And so both of those things have to happen. You need to have WASC approval, and you also need to have Department of Education approval. And then just looking at the definitions as far as what a direct assessment program has to have from the point of view of WASC. So you might think, oh, well, yes, it's a competency-based program. This is what it has. But think about what the point of view is of your accrediting body. So with this one, it's designed and delivered within the framework of the program's defined knowledge, skills, and disposition, so the competencies. And a student may acquire the competencies from multiple sources. I know that you can read it, so and you can take a look later. The institution employs assessment strategies. So that's key, that the competencies are assessed and that you're able to explain your assessment process, your procedures, who does the assessment, make sure that faculty are involved. And that's one of the pieces that's very critical for WASC, is to make sure that faculty are involved in the decision to go to a new modality or a new program, as well as the implementation. And then it goes on to describe that it adheres to policies and so forth. So an institution is expected to seek prior WASC approval when 50% or more of the degree is awarded based on student competencies. There are so many hybrid kinds of opportunities out there now. So that's what WASC determines, is to look at a 50%, which your institution would have to figure out. So that's the challenge. But that's one thing I would recommend, is first think about what's needed by the Department of Education, as well as what is needed by your accrediting body.
Now, I think that one of the things that, as both of y'all highlighted there, is that accreditation agencies can be very different on their process that they ask you to go through, their terminology for certain things. And so I think it's incredibly important that whatever accreditation agency you are working with, maybe, it could be many out there, because I think someone earlier said that College of Nursing, the American Association of College of Nursing, AACN, is also looking at maybe innovate and reinventing our curriculum, which is great. But what accreditation agency are you looking at? Making sure that you go to their page on CBE, and what does that take? And one of the things with this resource that we post is that we will continue to go in there and add things. I will probably won't hit all of them, but try to get as many different accreditation agency links in there, so that way you'll know where to go, depending on your agency. So you talked a little bit about that beginning process. What does that look like? And what the process was. But on your campus, who did you actually get involved to make this happen? I mean, I'm sure most of it probably fell on y'all, but who had to be involved in this process to make sure that it was implemented well?
I think that's a great question, and every campus is different in terms of what it takes to move an idea forward and get it across the finish line to implementation. And on my campus, being it's a smaller campus, it's no different than a big campus. The president, with intentionality, gave me my job title of senior vice president specifically for this particular reason. And I work well with the deans. I was one of them for a long time. So it's easy to have the conversation within an academic capacity. But don't lose sight of the fact that it's not simply a curricular issue. Your SIS, if you don't have CBE now, your SIS, I'm 90% sure, is not set up to handle. So your ability to keep records, your ability to generate an invoice, your ability to pay that invoice within your business office, all runs on the backbone of your SIS system, which must be modified in some way for CBE, even if it is a credit-based CBE, time-based. that paradigm fits easily on top of what we already do. Still, it is tremendously difficult to get that system to understand, let's say, a subscription model where you can take all you want for one low price. It gives my computer a headache, if I can put it that way. But more than that, the staff in that area, they work really hard, but they are very structured in the way that they think and the way that they operate on my campus. And so the ambiguity that comes with a new delivery format and without a full set of here's what you do when guides from the Department of Education or state bodies that may provide some funding, it's a challenge. And so please don't overlook that when you begin this conversation on your campus. Engage those people early and often, because oftentimes the price tag that comes with changing your SIS is larger than you expect.
And I know that, one of the things that Ellen mentioned a minute ago was that getting faculty involved, right? Making sure that if it's a particular program you're looking at, making sure those faculty are getting involved. If it's a little bit wider, making sure you have different people in there. I was always told, make sure your IT group is always involved. Make sure that is. So Ellen, when y'all got started many moons ago, and even now, as you're thinking about, I know y'all are bringing on different programs as you're looking at that. Who did you get involved and who are you continuing to get involved?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. And that's true. It's not like we're done, because we are adding programs. And so we still have to go through the processes, and things have changed and improved. One of the things that Brett made me think about was that we had probably too many groups that were not talking to each other at first. So not necessarily too many stakeholders involved, but how do you connect them together? And what I wasn't originally planning to show this, but this is the document, that's the proposal that you would use for WASC. And what made me think about it as you were both talking was that this can actually help you determine who it is that you need to have involved, because when you answer these questions, you'll say, oh, I don't know that. I need to bring this person in. And those are the people you need involved. So the program overview, the background, the history, that's some of your folks who have been around a while, some, perhaps your provost, your vice presidents and so forth of the higher level, to give you the basic context, and then your faculty and deans, depending upon what program. Our programs are primarily business programs, and so we engaged our business school quite a bit. But then when you look here, program need and approval, well, that's our institutional research, that's our marketing, and so we need to have data for that. Planning and approval process, that makes you think, the board, depending upon your trustee situation, various administrators that need to approve, you want to connect them, as Brett said, early and often. Later is not as good when you find out all of a sudden that the registrar says, oh, we need a separate code for this, or whatever the situation may be. Curriculum, more straightforward with the deans and the faculty and so forth. Academic records. So what is the transcript going to look like? What is the diploma going to look like? Is it the same? Is it different? Educational effectiveness is assessment. So we already talked a little bit about that. So that's whatever department oversees your assessment, and the faculty who are involved in that. Faculty, what are you going to do as far as faculty? We have a separate faculty model. We use tutorial faculty. They're not necessarily crossing over with our traditional full-time faculty. So what is your institution going to do as far as that? Will you have enough faculty? What's your ratio? Student support services. So that brings in your financial aid, career services, admissions, library, technology, which Brett talked a lot about. And for us, using Strut was something that we needed to figure out. What are we going to use? It doesn't work to use Blackboard for us. So what's our option? And Strut works very well for us. Financial resources, so financial aid, of course. and then a teach out plan, which we hope not to have to worry about. But at any rate, to me, just looking at that proposal kind of helps you walk through all of the different people who you need to include.
Now, I think that's great because I really think that any implementation that you do across the campus or even a department, I always feel like there's always somebody that I'm forgetting, right? And so I love that, Ellen, being able to go through each one of those and like, do I have the right people to bring in to be able to talk about this particular area?
Yeah, now that Ellen kind of stepped on through that, one of the biggest surprises for me when we started down this road, when we had made the decision that we're going to do this, was how many policies in the catalog do not apply to CBE. In other words, there's no way you could mediate a grade dispute or a refund policy or et cetera that are in your catalog from each of those departments that she mentioned. And it began this long series of conversations on our campus of every time we go and solve that issue with new policy language and put it off to the side for approval, we uncovered another one that was tied to. And so it's more than just thinking about the redesign of the curriculum, engaging the faculty and how you deploy faculty labor. It's easy to see the benefits of a CBE program when it's up and running. It's getting it up and running. That's the fun part.
Definitely. And there's always more parts than you ever think about when you're putting something together. So now that you've decided to do it, who you're going to get involved, you may be adding people as you go, but what was your biggest kind of aha moment as you were going through? Was it, maybe a best practice, or maybe it was, oh, we should have done this so differently as you were going through?
Go ahead, Ellen.
Oh, I can jump in. There are so many things, but one of the major things that we changed, and this just was how it worked best for us, was we initially really delved into having objective questions and adaptive learning, and we had psychometrician, very detailed, very challenging to do. And we also had competencies that were project-based, and we ended up going to all project-based. And that was several years in. So that was a big aha. We thought that it would help kind of figure out where students were and what they would need by initially testing them, for lack of a better word, on where they were. But it just wasn't as smooth. Was a huge headache as far as proctoring tests and such. But that was one big piece, and that's gone much better. As far as best practices, training manuals, really documenting things, that was a big challenge at first because you are flying the plane while it's being built. And you work really hard doing these front end things. And then a year or two, you go, oh no, this isn't working. Now we have to go back and rethink all of those documents. And that's a challenge. So I don't know how you solve that one. Maybe you don't need to get as detailed at first, detailed enough for your accrediting body, but it may be that you just plan to keep revisiting that. And there are questions yet that we have now. There's one that we're grappling with in terms of stopping out. So if it's self-paced and a student opts to depart and come back later sometime, what if later is a long time? And really the whole purpose was to try to move them forward more quickly. Is there a time limit after all? So just thinking about those kinds of details. And then I would say, I mentioned the faculty model, trying to figure out how that works. We are looking at some other models now because we are finding that the separation of the CBE faculty with the regular faculty for our online is not as efficient as it could be. And there may be some efficiencies we can have. And then communication, as I mentioned earlier, and that's always a problem, no matter where you are. And so it makes it even more challenging to find a method of making sure you're not doing things twice, doing things differently, connecting with each other, but yet not having so many meetings that people say, we're just in meetings all the time, we can't get everything done.
Brett?
Yeah, if I look back on everything that we did to get this program approved, a few things kind of stuck out at me. One, I have to put this gently. The timeline that your accrediting body says that it takes to get this approved might be a suggestion. Can I put it that way? So we started this during the pandemic, and I'm sure that it had a lot to do with our timeline that we had. But if you're putting together a business model for the decision makers on your campus, that's the one variable you really can't control. And so, pad your timeline there if that's part of your planning purposes. I think I'll agree with Ellen on a couple of points. The deployment of faculty in an efficient manner is definitely a challenge. A lot of faculty contracts, and I'm on a small campus, so our full-time faculty or adjuncts, we use them in every modality, including this one. And so for a full-time faculty member, how much load do you give for CBE when it's not course-based? That's a discussion that takes a while through the decision-making processes within academic affairs. Oftentimes those are tied up in the faculty handbook, and those policies are sometimes not easily changed. The important element that I think you need to not overlook, because we haven't mentioned it yet today, is if you choose to do this, how sure are you that you can sell it? What is your market research in your locality tell you about essentially the two main elements, the flexibility and the price tag on it? Is that going to make you better or more effective as a competitor in your city, in your state, in your region? In many cases it does, in other cases it doesn't. So just make sure you're walking through that, knowing that if you're going to go into this project, that it will be received well by your clientele.
Yeah, I think that there are sometimes people forget to kind of go outside their institution and think about maybe the companies that are around there that they want to filter their students to, right? And what are the skill sets that they're looking for? Can you partner with them? Can you have an articulation agreement? Have either of y'all done any of that? And does that help or hurt or anything with the accreditation process on creating kind of those articulation agreements with companies or other entities?
We have an entire notebook full of articulation agreements with our colleges or tech centers that are in our region, and in many cases, just like everything else on campus, those articulation agreements, the wording of them presumes essentially a seat time equivalency, and so whether it's price per credit hour reduction or transferability of credits or whatever, just make sure you review those and make sure that they're consistent with the CBE model. And you should be able to lay it right on top of those relationships, Howard.
I agree. We have done some business-to-business relationship building that has worked well for us. And especially with it being competency-based and looking what employers really need, one thing you can do, many of you probably already have advisory groups for each of your programs, and bringing in advisory boards early on or adding to them and kind of getting that buy-in at the beginning and that helps bring people in, helps them understand. And so that's one thing that we've done, is try to educate about competency-based education, because that's an ongoing education that's needed, and get out into the community and do outreach. And it's definitely valuable to go out in the community in that way and engage various stakeholders.
No, I think that again, I think sometimes that's a piece that sometimes is missing when people are thinking about, well, I'm going to put CBE together because I want to reach a different maybe population of students, maybe either the military or non-traditional students. And sometimes CBE will help me do that, or retention, things like that. But always thinking about, what are you doing this for? Hopefully keeping people in your area with that tax base, right? And getting them into the companies that are around you, and being able to work with them on that.
If I can, this may be my unique way of looking at it, but having been the business dean and that person in the community who's shaking hands and making relationships and passing those relationships off to the staff on campus to help with enrollment questions and answers, it really helps to have a complete portfolio, of which a CBE model is just one piece. Not all learners, and we all know this implicitly, that not all learners are ready for CBE. Not all learners are ready for online. Some of them need the structure of the main campus classroom. But what CBE does is it provides you a comprehensive answer to really any objection that somebody might throw up in the community. If cost is an issue and they're hung up on the price tag and the high cost of going to college, well, you have a non-credit platform or a CBE delivery model that keeps that overhead real low, and therefore the out-of-pocket cost really low. If you need a more structured relationship, well, we have the regular online program. If you need that structure, the main campus, we have that as well. That's our premier product, and that, of course, has the higher price tag. In this day and age, overcoming the objections, especially when there's not enough students to go around, it is going to be really key in landing new students for your programs.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the big takeaways is trying to figure out why do you want to do it to begin with, right? Who is your audience? Who is, what is your why, right? To be able to move in that direction. And everyone's going to have a little bit of different one. A lot of them's going to be the same, cost and getting people through faster and things like that. But there may be other things that may be a little different depending on what people are doing. But you did bring up a point, Brett, about that, going CBE doesn't have to be a credit-based program, right? It could right. Start off in, say, your professional development office with certifications. So I'm going to, I guess, Ellen, did y'all look at it in that way? And what does that look like compared to maybe your degree programs that you did?
Yeah, that's a great question. For us, that came later. We focused on the degree programs at first, and then our continuing ed or extended education program really jumped on it because it was extremely marketable for the businesses that they work with, and they are already very focused on the competencies and hands-on and application. And so it's a great opportunity for looking across the university, even professional development within your own university. So there are lots of opportunities to think about this model.
Definitely. I didn't know if you had anything, Brett, to add to that from your point of view.
What was the original question?
Not just doing it credit-based, but being able to do certification programs or other.
Yeah, certainly. We developed a whole new product line around this, and we refer to our CBE programs as OKU Flex for the flexibility that it offers, but we have a non-credit platform that we offer certificates through. called OKU Pro for professional development. It's that non-credit piece. And so for less than $100, you can learn just about anything that you want. But the difference, obviously, is in the faculty treatment and the depth of what we ask them to walk through in terms of credit versus non-credit. But especially in my area, the market's been hit really hard with labor issues. And there's a lot of this across the country, but even the local restaurant down the street can't find enough employees and has to close early because they simply can't keep it open at night because they don't have enough employees to keep it open. In that case, I've been really successful in approaching those business owners saying, hey, if you have learning gaps with the people that you have on staff now, as a way to both retain them, but also upskill them in a very cost-efficient manner, come along and let me show you this. And you don't have to pay for a whole college degree. For $65, let me have them for 3 weeks and I'll bring them back to you improved. But a lot of that is improved with the Strut Learning platform because it makes it so easy to build things out on it. If I can back up to the accrediting relationship, this is a question for Ellen. And so hopefully we can benefit here across the accrediting bodies. In the Higher Learning Commission, I did not have to get my use of the Strut approved. In other words, the Higher Learning Commission does not necessarily care what software vendor you're using. There are other pieces of that relationship they do want to approve in the application. Was that the same in WASC?
Yes, absolutely. They're not very prescriptive, I would say, about many things. They want the institution to be able to back up their decisions with evidence and with, good decision making and why did you choose this platform and so forth. And so there are opportunities to explain what you're using. If it's a brand new platform to the university, if I'm reviewing it, I'll ask more questions. I want to make sure everybody's trained and so forth and make sure that they have the technology to back it up. But no, it's not something that they have to evaluate or approve with WASC.
That's a great question. So one of the things that I guess I think about is that if an institution is brand new to CBE, they're thinking about it, but trying to think about going through the accreditation process, one of the things they could do ahead of time is maybe work with their professional development office because that is non-credit. It's not using financial aid. You don't have to actually get it accredited. It's a way for institutions to come in, understand what they're doing, how they're putting together. What does it look like when you need to staff the faculty or, working maybe even with your SIS to make sure that happens. So there's I think a lot of things that people can do to kind of test the waters, I guess. And then when they're putting together their accreditation, the templates that they need to fill out, they have a little bit better idea of what that looks like. How long is it going to take for them to do something? Who should they involve with it? Because they've kind of done that a little bit. I don't know. Is that a great way for maybe some people to get started that haven't done it before?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid way. And I think one of the things that everybody listening should understand is that CBE Strut Learning in terms of the platform, you can think of it very similar to an LMS because it has some of that functionality within it. But it's actually much more cost effective than what you're paying for your LMS. I've contracted them all at some point in my career, and this is the most cost effective platform I've ever seen.
From a long-term point of view too, I just want to share that one of the things that we're working on now is to figure out some good ways of articulating between our own professional units and so forth with our for credit and our baccalaureate programs, and so or master's programs. So not only would you get experience learning how to do it, it's another option, but if you find ways to transfer those units, sometimes in bulk, so that you might need to take a few different CEUs or continuing education of some sort, kind of little buckets that you would put together, and that might equal a 3-unit course. So that even though at this point the businesses are interested in immediate hands-on, the students may not be interested in long-term education, but down the road they may be, and then they could come back to your institution and use what they've already done. So not unlike any other modality, but it's something to think about for CBE as well.
Hey, Rhonda, I may be jumping ahead in the script here, but I want to honor everybody's time. Are there any questions from the attendees?
So far, no. And it was funny because I was just thinking that, if anyone does have any questions, definitely please post them. Or if it's a more intricate question that's harder to write, you can always jump on and video and audio and ask us as well. So I think we were at that point that, definitely if people have any questions for Ellen, Brett, or myself, then we can definitely entertain those. Look at the chat, see if anything's happening.
Okay.
Or if you want to share your experience too, we can learn more. We'd love to.
Yes, definitely. Well, while people are thinking about their question and opportunities, basically, what would be your takeaway? What would, for anyone that's here that is either getting started or even in the middle of it, what would you like them to take away? And
I just, from a book I read 25 years ago, you can and should determine your future as an institution. CBE may very well be a part of that. If you don't, somebody else surely will, and it may not be the outcome that you want to have. So this CBE at this point is still really out on the horizon for most institutions, and it's always easier to be first than to have to be the best in order to get into the market. So there's an opportunity window here for everyone. If you're considering it, if you're in this meeting, you're doing the right thing. And so take some piece of information back to your campus. I hope it's helpful for you.
Well, and Tom actually posted a great question. He said, have you noticed key differences when you go through accreditation with your agency about just like traditional programs or even traditional online programs compared to CBE programs?
Yeah, Higher Learning Commission has a completely separate approval process. There's really not a visit involved or an option for a visit for CBE with the Higher Learning Commission. It always goes to a change panel first. It was really helpful for us to call first before we started doing anything, since it was so new and there's not an extensive bank of policies there to guide us, and really just ask our liaison at the Higher Learning Commission about what we were getting into and what we were intending to do for their advice and what that process was going to look like. And our liaison did give us a lot of great advice that helped us to keep from reinventing the wheel or go down rabbit trails we needn't do. So that, I think that really shortened our development time.
And Ellen, what about WASC?
Yeah, I would say for WASC, there'll be some similar questions, the same idea that they want to make sure to see evidence and so forth, but they are catered to the accreditation aspect, the competency-based aspect. And I would say, don't assume that your readers or even the folks who will be reading and making the decision at WASC know a lot about competency-based. If they weren't in the thick of it somewhere, may not understand it the way you do. So I would say to backtrack in your proposal and really explain where you're coming from with CBE, so that it's kind of an education process for them too. You never know quite who your audience is. Of course, they will select people that have had some experience, but it may be different than your own or where you're headed. So that would be important to consider.
Let me come back here and add on to this, because the question from, if I can open up my chat box again, Nathan, ties into the end of Tom's question there. Mm-hmm. If your campus already has an existing, let's say, online campus that's focused at that adult or graduate market, a lot of the infrastructure and the lessons learned there are going to help you when you're filling out that CBE application. Because again, when you're filling out that application, the way the application's written, it's designed to be generic. And so you have to tell your story about how you serve the student, and what you're going to do differently with CBE. If you're just a traditional campus and you don't have that experience, then the answer, Nathan, is yes. You have to explain in detail what the role is of all of those people. What's an academic success coach? How do faculty work? How are they deployed? What's their workday look like, et cetera? Who's giving feedback and when? Who initiates contact between faculty and student? And so there is a whole different set of questions there than if you just want a traditional program that rests upon the assumption of the traditional campus environment. So it's both and, not either or.
Yeah, and I think that last question, was the accreditor open to alternative supervision? I think it's really about
yes, they are.
How you write it out, right? I love the idea. It's your story. You have to tell them what you're expecting to happen. And so if you're able to do that, then.
Yeah, Joshua, it's a little bit bigger than just a structure of curriculum. It's the way that you define how you're going to set this up. And it really, you can do direct assessment, which is what I refer to as kind of the Wild West way of doing it. Or you can create a credit-based, which means it kind of looks like a class on a transcript, or you can do it time-based, which means you have fixed start and end times, or you can have modifications of all those. You kind of have a 3x3 grid, if you will, of different ways that you can set this up. So there are some resources out there. She's showing CBEN on the screen right now. It's a great place to start. Their annual conference is worth every single dollar. So please go to it, and I'll see you there. End of commercial.
Yeah, and I would go back in conjunction with that to Lisa's question is, how has your grading changed based on CBE? And I think that is one of the biggest things when it comes to curriculum, that you don't grade everything like you do in like an online course. You don't grade the discussion and the quiz. It's really about mastery. And so you are utilizing things like the interaction with the faculty member as they guide you through the process, quizzes maybe to help them understand and get an idea. Do you have the basic information down, that kind of rhetorical kind of stuff, all the way to, turning in an actual summative evaluation that could be several throughout a course, or it could be one at the very end. I mean, it's different ways to be able to put them together. But what you want to think about is, how can you guide the students through their learning and get to where you are having them demonstrate that mastery. And when Ellen was talking about earlier that they kind of started off with that adaptive approach, which I think works as well, but I think a lot of people are starting to kind of move into making sure people finish with the project to really help them demonstrate that they truly have mastery over that particular competency.
Yeah, and if I can jump in on the end of Lisa's question there. At its heart, CBE means to develop if you will, if I can use the word course and competencies interchangeably here. How you develop the course is the key difference in what we're talking about here. And so you need to begin, again, we do a business degree just like Ellen does as our first one because it was one that we had the most experience with. But I had to really start with the faculty and begin at the very beginning. So what should a BSBA student be able to look, see, think, and do? All right. And from there, work our way down into competencies. So it's not as easy as just pulling out the course objectives from your existing syllabi and slapping them together and calling it that. It all needs to be targeted down toward what are they going to be competent in doing. And you have to define that. And that's the beginning of it. It takes a little bit of thinking up front, but once you've done that, development then becomes easy. And so I know Strut has some resources, rubrics as you were calling it, that are available, but there's different ways to do that as well.
There's also, I'm scroll down to the quality framework to help with Joshua's question, curriculum layout structures, but also what to look at in terms of framework. So I would, as Brett said, encourage you to go to their conference, which is in October, I believe, and also look at their resources, look at Strut's resources, and I imagine, Brett, you may be willing to be contacted. I'm certainly open to be contacted.
Oh, please, yes,
to help.
please.
So we'd like to help.
But if you would, little secret, I'm getting ready to change institutions. So so catch me on LinkedIn and not necessarily my university profile.
Yes, definitely. And obviously, Strut, we're here to help anyone through that process as well, to get you started and get your faculty on board and work with them as well. So it's a fun process. I've been doing it for almost 10 years now, and like Ellen, and it's fun to kind of break it all down. You know, I've been teaching for over 30 years. And so I know I taught very differently when I first started teaching a long time ago, but now it's really, you know, what do I want my students to really be able to take from their course? And that's kind of boils down to the competency base. What are those competencies? What are those things that they need to take into the workforce?
Yeah. That's a good question. I'm going to do the same thing, Ellen.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. Yeah, I'm open to any questions, as is Rhonda and Ellen, I'm sure. So actually, I made mental notes. I'm going to call Ellen and ask 2 or 3 questions.
Same thing, Brett, right back at you.
They're going to let me out of the loop. What? And so,
well, you come too.
Well, we are at the top of the hour. I am so glad that everyone was able to join us. Thank you so much to Brett and Ellen for joining us and talking through, you know, what is all of this about when it comes to accreditation. So let us know if you have any questions, and hopefully we'll see you we are continuing these. Hopefully the next one I think is going to be on financial aid. And we may end up having the same people here. We'll see. But continue to look out for our webinar series, because we will continue this conversation as we go.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.